Thank you so much for being here to talk to our students today. I really appreciate your time. You have so much industry experience. I remember when I was working in HR, when I first started, you were like an icon in HR. You have so much knowledge to share with our students. And I'm really excited. You're going to give them this really awesome strategic overview of HR and how that staffing function fits in. But before we get started, can you give the students kind of well, introduce yourself and kind of give them an idea of your career track so that maybe they can see, maybe, is this the career track that I'd like, kind of give them a picture of what your career track was.
Okay, great. Well, my name is Debbie Dault, and I'm actually now president of Dault Global Solutions. Yes, it is my company. And how I got here is probably different than most people because when I was in college, I graduated with a degree in business marketing. And I remember, fresh out of college, trying to figure out what job I was going to get that would be professional. And I was interviewing, and back in those days, this shows you how old I am, we used the thing called a newspaper, and we would look at classified ads. And so I was answering ads, and it boiled down to two companies at the time. And one was Xerox. And Xerox, it was for their marketing department. And it was very in line with what I had been to school for. It was very traditional. And then this other really weird ad caught my attention, and it was called an assistant operations manager. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what that is, but I read more and it talked about recruiting and hiring people and working maybe for a temporary staffing company. So I interviewed with them too. And it was so interesting. I got a job offer from both. I took temporary agency, which had been only in business for 4 years. It had started in a condo in Dallas, Texas, and they had been around 4 years. Xerox, obviously, Fortune 50 company at the time. What was interesting, 6 months later, the job for Xerox was non-existent. That non-existent. It totally eliminated that position. They eliminated that department. And I was trying to decide earlier what marketing would do. I decided early on that I would be marketing people. And I liked marketing people better than marketing a product or service. And so here I am for this company that's little bitty, and we are recruiting, we are hiring, sometimes 100 people a week. And we're working with these top companies in Fort Worth, Texas. And it was the best match ever. I couldn't believe how much, it's almost like an endorphin I received when I would find the right person, match them with the right company, put them, in a right job. Sometimes they would go on to have that job for many years. And it just had this feeling almost from social working where you just felt like I have done something good. And people would come back and say, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I've, been there for 3 years. I've gotten these promotions. And it really felt good, I guess is what I needed. I needed that match. I needed something not to be boring. I needed to use my brain and be creative. In that time, I had 11 promotions within 15 years. So I had a chance to do so much more with that little bitty company that grew to this big company than I would have ever done. And it was all variants of human resources. Recruiting and staffing is where I pretty much stayed because that was my heart. I became a talent acquisition director, which to me is a really fancy name for recruiter. But it worked. And I started a division where we worked with, it was called the professional division. So we hired temporary attorneys, temporary CFOs, and we worked on projects all over the place. So it was a different look. When I talk to students now and they're talking about they're getting their degree in HR, I'm thinking, how awesome is that? They don't have this learning curve of some of the things that I had no idea about that I was learning as I go because I had a non-traditional. But I think what's good about HR in general is it has evolved so much and there's so many different opportunities for people that if you're an introvert and really don't want to interview people all the time or something, you could go into HRIS and there's a lot of analysis that's going on as well. So that was kind of my career path in a very weird way, but I happen to have loved every minute of it. I was very blessed and did a lot of recruiting and hiring.
So in this position, you obviously grew into a leader in the organization and you helped the HR become a major function for this organization.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about how HR collaborates with other groups, how the organization competes in the marketplace, and how you support that?
That's a great question. A lot of times, HR, I used to, in fact, a very brief story is I ended up in the actual HR department instead of being a business leader because I made some major problems happen. And so I got called into the CEO's office, and I'm thinking I'm getting a promotion from to be this other business leader, and I was being put into HR. And so I got into HR at that point for being in trouble. And it was so interesting to get into that side of it because I knew what a business partner needed. But now I'm looking at the HR side of things, and there really does have to be a collaboration. You're working with sometimes business partners will have an acquisition or a requisition to hire somebody, get headcount. They have maybe unrealistic goals or zero goals. They'll have something in between. And you really have to set that expectation. They see you as a problem solver. You've got to understand what their needs are and help them find that person. And sometimes, they're just like, I just want a body. I just want somebody to show up to, do whatever this job is. And it was my job to sometimes I called it getting them off the cliff, talking them down, talking them off the ledge, and then getting them to really help me understand their position. So it had to be a partnership. If I just looked at something very, blanket wise and go, okay, here's the main task that somebody's going to need to do, it didn't help. And the people would see it as a combative relationship sometimes. And it's HR's job, I believe, to make that more collaborative and more of a partnership and find out what is their pain points. What is the biggest deal? Will they come off of having somebody with a 4-year degree or 12 years of experience if they could find this? And so you have to compromise and get them to understand where you're coming from, and then both of you understand what the expectations are.
You mentioned goal setting. So some of them had unrealistic goals or no goals at all. As a department, I'm sure that you made goals and you worked across the organization to have those goals supporting the organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how you create goals in the staffing process and how you manage those goals?
I love that. You have to have a staffing plan. And when you are working with an organization and you are all supporting the big picture, the big goals, what can you do to make that happen? Staff Staffing plans were something that very strategic putting together to say, okay, this company in California or this division in California wants to hire 25 engineers. So I've got to put that into my plan, figure out what's going on in the marketplace, and make sure that that jives with the overall objectives from the corporation, because so many times it didn't. And I had to put together things like, okay, I understand that this is what you're wanting. And from a growth perspective, we're going to need to hire this many people in this many different places. That means that we've got to look at succession planning to see if there's some place that we can get people that we already have. Is there a way that we can train them for that position? And then other times it would be so difficult for a specific skill set that as a larger organization, we would decide to like buy a company that had that type of skill set. So we would buy a company sometimes for the employees. So every end of the spectrum, but you had to have some sort of plan and some analysis that went on. It's not just throwing things at a dartboard and hoping something sticks. There has got to be an objective plan in place, and it has to be made from gap analysis. It's got to be looked at from another perspective. Then you put your staffing plan together, and then it's got to be a part of the bigger organization plan. Does that answer your question? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, it does. You mentioned a gap analysis, so I don't think the
Mhm.
students would be familiar with that term. Can you
Okay.
expand on that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite terms because it's exactly what it sounds. You have an area that you're trying to get to. You know where you need to go, and here's where you are. There's the gap. So my gap analysis is, what do I need to make this gap smaller and to get where I need to be at this goal? So if I have, let's say, a gap analysis with people that speak Chinese. I need to say, okay, I've got 20% of our people are speaking Chinese, and we're having this big project over in China. So my gap would be, I need 75% more people to speak Chinese. And so you really have to look at it from where you are, where you want to be, and what's the gap, and how you're going to close that gap.
So in this part, you're talking about different forms of forecasting the labor needs for the organization.
Yes, yes. And there's a plethora of types of gaps analysis that you can have.
So what are some of the challenges that you've faced with the staffing function? When you look back, what are some of your biggest challenges that you've overcome?
Okay. I think, again, trying to find the right people at the right time. And I see it today when we talk about the war for talent, and it's some sort of, I think we're under siege, right? Because you are trying to find the right people, and you see from a bird's eye view that you have these positions that are open. You have these people that are looking for jobs. Why can't they find each other? And it's because that there is a shortage of the skill sets that are needed, and sometimes unrealistic goals as well of people that are looking for a job. And yeah, it's like, you get out of college, I got to tell you, students, you're not going to come in as the CFO of the company, or a CHRO, which is your chief financial officer or your chief human resource officer. That doesn't come right out of college. But that's what I see sometimes with unrealistic goals on either side. But some of the biggest challenges is being creative to find these people. And it's not just finding bodies, but creating a relationship and a good experience, because it's all about the applicant experience now. It's about the employee experience. And people have so many more choices out there. So, what are you doing to make your company a brand of choice? What are you doing to make human resources a brand of choice? So, you have all of these things that are coming at you, and you have to be, I guess, flexible, creative, and figure out ways to get those. I always call it the square a hole, what is it, the square peg in a round hole. How do you get that to match? And that's what staffing is about.
I am so excited that you mentioned the employee experience. I was reading online, SHRM identified that as one of the top trends in HR right now.
It is.
Can you explain what the employee experience means, how it relates to the staffing process and talent attraction and retention?
Yes. If you think about it, you go to a restaurant and you have a good experience. The first thing that you might do is to put a review on Yelp or something, because you're wanting to share your experience. People nowadays have access to, now it sounds so old nowadays, but people have access to so much information. So if I am, in fact, I was needing to hire a monitor, not hire, buy a monitor yesterday. And the first thing I do is I start looking at reviews. That's what's happening for employees looking for jobs. They'll go to Glassdoor. They'll look and see, what is it like to be an employee at this company? So I'm not going to even apply for the job unless they have a certain amount of stars. Or what do they do in the community? Are they a company that gives back? I am looking for an experience, just like getting the best restaurant I can possibly get. It's got to fit me. And so, from an HR perspective, you've got to hit those buttons and hit those, I guess, their little check marks. What are you doing to make this experience? Because even if somebody is had some sort of touch, I call it the moment of truth. Anytime you touch a company, whether it's looking at an ad or seeing something on the internet, an article or whatever, or a job board, you're touching that company. So what does it look like to me? Does it make me feel warm and fuzzy? Is it something that if I want to be a part of this, or I want to refer people to it? Even if I don't get hired for that particular position, or even maybe apply, I have started a relationship with that company. And I've seen people that maybe it doesn't work at that point, but 4 years down the line, it might. And so that relationship has to be very positive. Even when you're getting a rejection letter, it has got to be a positive experience because, and I've seen people do this recently where I got these rejection letters, but they're so nice. And they said, hey, we understand this isn't the right position for you, but we want you to keep on looking with us, and it's just this warm, fuzzy thing. That's the companies that you want to work for. And that's that relationship. And it starts at the very first, inkling that somebody sees your name or company name. And it goes all the way into where maybe you retire with the company. It is a relationship that never goes away.
Yeah, that's really, it really syncs well with the whole idea of the talent philosophy, how the organization is going to treat their employees, and how that concept that is designed in the management function, in the leadership function, how that actually pushes out and touches everything. That experience, it doesn't just touch the staffing function. It's not just glass door, like you said, it's really about that whole employment relationship, which means everybody in the organization has to be on board with it.
Mm-hmm.
The culture of the organization has to be shaped by HR. That whole shaping piece starts in the talent function. When you're
Mm-hmm.
when you're first attracting them, you're demonstrating what it is they're going to be experiencing in the employment relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
if that recruiter doesn't emulate what the organization is looking for, then yeah, they're not going to get it out of their talent.
Right.
Absolutely. A
That's
lot of this has come about from the whole concept of the war for talent,
mm-hmm.
the old war for talent. It's like the talent is new. If you look on the internet right now, there's so much stuff about the war for talent coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of talked about it a little bit. Can you expand on that in your experiences, how you've competed for labor, anything that you've done to from a strategic level in order to attract and retain talent?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's interesting because the war for talent has been a buzz phrase for many years, but I don't think I've seen anything like it before because it's almost like the minute you find that you have an open position, it's like being on a game show and the clock is ticking and you are competing with every other company that is looking for that same person, and you've got to be able to win it out, read what is it, The Art of War. I mean, this is the type of thing that you really have to be looking at. How am I going to win this fight? Because it is somewhat of a fight. You are all competing for the same people, and how can you do this differently? One of the things I think that I learned early on, especially in temporary staffing in such large projects, is we would do little what we call brainstorming at the end of the day, and we would do things like go out and get flyers and go to parking lots and just put them on windshields, things that were just so common, and those were not necessarily for low level positions. It was for other types of things that we were needing, and you had to come up with different ways. You cannot just put a position on a job board and think it's going to happen. This is where you have to get creative. Where do these people hang out? What associations are they a member of? What do they do for hobbies? Go show up at their hobby place. All of these types of things have to be thought of outside of the box, and that's hard for people. They don't really sometimes think about what can we do to be um, the employer of choice. And I think that's probably the biggest thing in the war for talent. We're also seeing a big trend going because of COVID. Our lovely friend from last year and that's still here this year is we have proven to people that they can work from home. Now we're saying, oh, guess what? We all need to come back to the office. And we are seeing companies lose people by the truckload because they're going, you know what? We know we can work from home. We've seen that we can work from home. And so we're going to go to work for a company that will let me work from home. So now you have this whole other component that you've got to be able to address and think differently. Maybe don't think about, I'm going to get this person on board for 6 months, or excuse me, 6 years. I might be get this person on board for a year, and that's going to be okay. So you just have to take this war and look at it differently from a strategic standpoint for every step of the way. What can I do better than my competitors? And what can I do to make these people want to come here and stay here and refer people to us? Because that once we get that right person, we want 20 of those people. And so what can we do to incentivize these people to go give us more people? Hopefully that makes some sort of sense.
When you talk about the war for talent, the three key things that I have always said that kind of encapsulates it. First, there's a labor shortage in that particular area. There's steep competition for that particular labor. So there's a surplus of jobs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's crazy incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Incentives. So organizations are competing. The wages are going up. That employee experience is expanding.
Mm-hmm.
The work environment is getting more more amenities. You look at Apple and Google and how they compete for talent. Do you think that you would add to that, or you think that's still accurate as far as the new war for
It's
talent?
it's very accurate. And I was talking to somebody yesterday because we were talking about needing people for a specific skill set, and we're having trouble finding it. And I said, well, a friend of mine was the chief people officer at Yahoo a few years ago, and she obviously, they struggled to get these software developers and so forth and programmers. And lo and behold, right outside of their location in California, a gigantic billboard comes up, and it says, if you can solve this equation or problem or whatever, it was like a math thing, give us a call. You should be working for us. That was Google. So Google was so creative of sending that up. And she said that they were losing people because they saw that as it wasn't necessarily even more money. It was something that connected with those people. What can I do that, hey, these people appreciate my brain and they appreciate, and I can solve this problem. So I think that's part of and it's really in what you're saying in terms of the lack of talent and the labor force because we don't have the right people. So the only other thing I would throw in there from the war of talent is create those people. You've got to reskill, retrain, and sometimes you look at that even when you're recruiting to say, okay, maybe I don't have the absolute perfect person, but I do have some other things. So I'm going to be flexible and I'm going to retrain this person. And within 6 months, they will be the right person. And they're going to have that loyalty with me because I took them where they didn't fit everything, but they fit most. And I created a person for that position. And I think that's the other way to win the war for talent. But you've hit the main things of what causes, I guess, the war for talent. Mm-hmm.
I wonder what the workforce is doing nowadays and to address that. Now that we have so much change and turnover right now.
Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't matter, in my opinion, of the actual size of the organization. Yes, you can't throw resources if you're a smaller company that where you could actually bring somebody on at a salary and then train them. But what if you were able to offer training free of charge, even for applicants that are interested in something, and you set it up on your website of looking for a career? It's like, oh, here's the positions that we have. If by chance you don't fit one of these positions, but it looks interesting to you, we ask that you take this course, and this course will, end up where you get, a quasi certificate or whatever. And so I'm offering that free training, which people really want right now. So anything that you can give them for free training, they're going to be increasing their skills. So I see what you're saying in terms of there's a lot, it's easier resources if you have a big organization and you can have these different things. But I'm also finding that it's not necessarily all about money that people are looking for in terms of trying to find these people and reskill them. Their skill set being improved, giving me training, giving me opportunities to have more days off, whatever it might be taken. You've got to figure out what it is other than just throwing money at it. And I think a lot of it will be that people are expecting to take responsibility for their own training. And if you, as a company, will offer some of those things even free during the application process, you would be surprised at how loyal people could be to you. And even if they don't fit, they would tell other friends and their family or colleagues or whatever about your company and what they offer.
You make a good point about the free training. I know that there are a lot of temp agencies, the larger ones. Spirion, I know, does this. There's a couple others. They have free training that they offer individuals who apply through them. And I
Mm-hmm.
know they have contracts with different employers.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's becoming a bigger business right now, providing free training to employees to upskill them
Mm-hmm.
or reskill them. You know,
Absolutely. it's something, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but when he started back in my career right out of college, one of the, I guess, key successes at that point was we had software training. And we had a large company in Fort Worth that needed, I forgot, it was like Word Perfect or something back in those days. And so people had word processing skills but didn't have Word Perfect. We could train them on Word Perfect. And once we trained those applicants on Word Perfect, all of a sudden we had this skill group that no one else had. And we were able to fill those positions and fill those positions. And so I do think that that's something companies need to think about, and employees need to think about that. What can I do to increase my skill set? But yeah, I do think also in a career path for HR, you've got the learning and development. That's also another opportunity within human resources, that you would be a trainer. You would help people get to those levels, whatever it might be, because that's also another, I guess, a gap in organizations, is you've got to keep training to keep up.
Yeah, I agree. In this new economy, the knowledge economy, the whole idea of the organization being responsible for the direction of your training, this is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Lifelong employment is gone. It's really on the individual to set out the plan, to figure out where they're going to go and what type of skills that you really need to be proactive nowadays.
That's
Absolutely.
exactly right. And long gone are the days where you get out of college, you work for an organization, you live there till you get a gold watch, you take a cruise and you die. That is not necessarily the life cycle of employment anymore. It's more like this, up and down, because you'll go to companies and leave and come back to another company and so forth. And that's okay. We just need to address it and be able to fit into that new mold.
Okay, so sort of to wrap this whole conversation up about strategic HR, staffing, and how it fits into the whole function of the organization, and knowing that the students viewing this are most likely management or HR majors. Do you have any career advice for them?
I think you have to decide yourself, do your own little self analysis of what's important to you. What do you like doing? What do you absolutely not like doing? And those things you have to be able to identify that, because I've seen people that have accounting degrees and accounting majors or whatever, they hate accounting. So, okay, why would you spend all that time and then think that that's the job you need to get? I was so lucky that I found a job that just ticked all my boxes, because it was something that I needed to help people. And that was something that I got a chance to do, but I didn't ever really want to be a social worker. That wasn't my style. So I think you just have to do a self analysis. And then I always say, go on the circuit, try to interview with as many people as you possibly can, because during that process, you're going to increase your skill set, but then you're also going to decide what you don't want. And times I've seen so many people coming out of college, and it's okay not to know what your next step is. But you go out there, you put yourself out there, and whether you can get an interview or not, you have friends that can interview you, you have family members. Go out there and talk to people and see, you'll start clicking it off in your head of, that sounds really good, or I would never want to do that for any amount of money. So I think that's something you've got to do, and take responsibility. It's not going to come to you. You're going to have to go out and get it.
I think that's a great point, that you should just get out there and start interviewing. I
Hmm.
think that when you first start interviewing, you're really nervous. You're still
Hmm.
trying to get your narratives together. You're still trying to figure out all of the pieces. So it's good to have those practice runs
Exactly.
after you've gone through it a couple times. Those questions that surprised you in the first couple interviews, you'll have the narratives down pat. And that gives you
Exactly.
some room for negotiating when you
Hmm.
finally get that job offer. You've had a phenomenal interview at that point.
Hmm. I
So,
agree.
looking early that's a great idea. It really was.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your time and all of the advice that you've given to the students, and for sharing your journey in HR with us.
Thank you. I am so excited that you are developing the future generation of hopefully some HR people. And I just want you, the students, good luck. I know our future is in your hands, and it's in good hands, right? Thank you, Rebecca.